everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. So welcome to today's episode, where we explore a critical topic for parents and caregivers, and that's protecting young children from the overwhelming impact of news overload and political stress. So joining me today is Danielle Lindner, an award-winning author, educational consultant, and a renowned parenting coach. With her expertise in early childhood education and her experience as the founder of the London Day School, Danielle offers invaluable insights into how we can safeguard our children's emotional well-being in today's fast-paced world. So why don't we dive in for this conversation that will help you navigate these challenges with confidence and care. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've written a book that addresses a hot topic with parents, and it's entitled Parents' Pocket Guide to Surviving the Preschool Years. So I want you to talk about that and your journey to writing that essential guide.
Sure. So about almost 20 years ago, I decided that I wanted to open a preschool that would really focus on things like STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math for kids, to focus on character education, teaching kids how to be good citizens of the world, foreign language. I wanted kids' experiences in preschool and in their preschool day to be really, really enriching and engaging. And, my kids were in my one daughter was in kindergarten and the other one was in preschool. And I just felt like they were just being, but they weren't really being engaged and challenged. And their minds were such sponges that I knew that even if I couldn't have the experience ready in time for my kids, hopefully I could create an experience that could help, hundreds of other kids. And so I started the London Day School in 2010. Then as time went on, I would work with parents. It's almost like you feel almost like you're a bartender, because parents will come into your office and they kind of just spill everything, everything that's going on, all their worries and concerns. And, year after year, I'd meet with parents and talk them through things. And then years went on and I started writing a column for the Huffington Post about parenting. And then I realized that I should really put all of this knowledge into a book that parents, wherever they're located, wherever they are, they could just pick this up and they have a guide for not every problem that they're going to face, at ages 18 months to age 5, but some of the big ones. And then hopefully do it with a little bit of humor and no judgment, because I think a lot of parents think that they're the only ones struggling with these problems, that they're a bad mom or dad if their child acts out or bites or isn't potty trained when their neighbor's child is potty trained. And I wanted parents to realize, look, I've been in this business a really long time. I'm a parenting coach and I'm writing from my experience of some failures. So
yes, and I like that. And that's really why I wanted to have you on, because parents are so easily influenced. You mentioned friends, but now we have influencers, and it's easy to feel like they are losing in this game when they see other people doing something different than they are. And those formative years, particularly the preschool years, really have their own set of challenges there. And they're, in addition to that, for those who have small children, they're handling the stress of news and political events. And so I'm wondering, how can parents balance that need to protect their children from all of that distressful news, but also with the importance of keeping them somewhat informed about the world around them?
Right. Well, I think a lot of parents, what they don't realize is that even if a child's playing in the corner of your room, If you have the news on, they are absorbing it and hearing it. So a lot of parents will say to me, "Oh, we have it on, but they're not paying any attention. They're on their device, or they're playing with blocks, or they're doing, playing with the baby dolls." And the truth is, yes, they are. They are absorbing much more than you think. And it's really not healthy for them to absorb things that are filled with so much stress.
Mhm.
I say if you can limit your news watching, I mean, even just for our own well being, try and limit our own news watching to, when your children are asleep and they're not around, they're not in earshot of the TV. That's a great way to start.
Mhm.
But putting your Good Morning America on, or which is a great show, or CNN or Fox or whatever you watch in the morning while they're eating their breakfast cereal, even if they're playing on their tablet, they're listening and they're hearing this first thing in the morning, and usually it's the bad stuff that happened the day before.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's hard for kids. They shouldn't really have to have that stress at a young age, and unfortunately, with the world we live in, they now do. So I know when I was a kid, and probably when we were both kids, it was very rare to listen to the news, have that kind of stress. I mean, when I think about what news did I hear as a kid, I think it was, the big things, when like Grace Kelly was in an accident or Ronald Reagan was shot, like big things that,
Mhm.
but it wasn't like the everyday, oh, a shooting, a car crash, or this, that. It just
Mhm.
wasn't in our world as much.
Mhm.
And our parents would watch the nightly news, usually at 11 o'clock, and that was
Mhm.
it, the 11 o'clock news. And
Mhm.
now it's just we are overloaded with news constantly 24/7. And I think we just have to try and monitor ourselves and monitor how much we allow our kids to be around in general.
Right. And that's really, it's a shame that we have to do that, because consuming news, whether it's watching on television or some screen, or reading the newspaper, that actually is a very positive behavior you want your children to pick up on. But at the same time, what they hear, a lot of it, they're just not going to be able to handle it. And it's so stressful. I mean, like you said,
It is.
every day. So it really will be, I really imagine that it's kind of tricky. I mean, trying to balance that, because they should know that they should want to be informed and know what's going
Right.
on in the world. And when they're younger, they're going to learn that from the people around them, the adults. But how do you balance that? How do you impart to them that it is important to stay informed of what's going on in the world, and sometimes you need to protect your peace too?
What's really good in preschool, at least in our preschool, is we get this like thing called Time for Kids. And so it's like current events. And so they'll pick out things that are kid friendly but important and good for kids to know.
Mhm.
And it's stuff like that that if parents can pick some of that stuff up at a bookstore or library or even Amazon, like these current event type things, you can subscribe to them. And once a month they get a little newspaper that's kid appropriate, and it'll talk about maybe like this, the astronauts, or
Mhm.
something that's happening with a volcano, or different things that are really interesting and current events, and teaches them about news and important things, but not bombarding them with all negative stuff.
Mhm.
I think that if parents can look to find more of those resources,
Mhm.
that's one thing they can do. And also, there's also like kids news shows, like shows that are specifically for kids. And you just have to look up in your area, PBS in whatever area you're in usually has like a kid appropriate news show. And
Mhm.
that's like a nice way of showing kids that there are current events, there's things happening around the world, there's things that you want to know about, but at their level.
Mhm. And what about in those cases where it's either they heard it and it just was beyond your control, or it's just so all consuming? Like, say, for example, when the fires were going on in
Right.
California, or something else where there are a lot of people affected and they're talking about it. How do you recommend that parents approach those sorts of issues, and maybe political issues or issues that really have a big effect, and they're talking about it all the time, and they've learned about it somehow?
Yeah, so I always kind of take the Mr. Rogers approach. So,
Mhm.
well, first, before that, even, I say, ask your child what they know and what they've heard. So don't right away say, oh, I assume you've heard about these terrible fires, like, because
Mhm.
you don't know that they have heard about that. They may have just heard that, there was a fire, or they don't
Mhm.
know the extent of it. So I
Mhm.
always say, ask your child first, tell me what you know, explain to me what you've heard, so
Mhm.
that you're not giving them more information than they already have and that they need to have.
Mhm.
And then make sure that they know that they are safe and that they're protected.
Mhm.
And because that's the most important thing for kids. They need to know that no matter what else is happening around the world, right now they are safe, they're with you, and you'll protect them. And also then I say take the Mr. Rogers approach, which is look at all the helpers.
Mhm.
And so, yes, things happen. There was, like when the plane went down
Mhm.
recently in your area in Washington,
Mhm.
a lot of kids heard about that and they were really scared to fly. They were really worried. And so I said, ask your kids, what have you heard? And if they say yes, there was a problem on a plane, and they're looking into it. They're going to fix it. They're going to figure out what happened, and you're going to be safe.
Mhm.
But the great thing is there are so many helpers that came to help people and make sure that, everyone was taken care of and felt loved and cared for. Don't go into every gruesome detail with
Mhm.
with the kid. If
Mhm.
they ask you about it, then you're going to have to address it, but hopefully they won't. Hopefully they don't,
Mhm.
depending
Mhm.
on the age, and make it age appropriate. A 3-year-old is going to know a lot less than, say, if a 12-year-old comes to you.
Mhm.
And if a 12-year-old's asking you these things, then I think you need to be a little bit more upfront about certain things. And, you might say, yeah, there was a definite issue with, air traffic control, and
Mhm.
it's a problem and it's terrible that it happened, but now they're going to look at that, and they're not going to let that happen again, because they're going to hopefully learn from the issues they've had. And that's like the 12-year-old approach. And the
Mhm.
3-year-old approach is, there is a problem, but we have all these helpers and we're taking care, everyone's being taken care of, but most importantly, you are safe and you are with me.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
know it's touchy, right? It's tough.
Right. It is. And listen, I'm thinking about all these parents now that they are really bombarded by all of these electronics and social media and all of that it sounds like you and I didn't quite have to deal with our children, and my children. I have twin sons who are 25, and
Yeah.
they they didn't play with tablets when they were toddlers. There
Mhm.
were no tablets when they were toddlers. Hey, Mama, I get it. I remember those early days of motherhood, feeling totally outnumbered and out of my depth with my twin boys. Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems for My Journey is the book I wish I'd had back then. In my mini motherhood memoir, I share the real, unfiltered moments, from overwhelm to breakthroughs. Along the way, I discovered 7 guideposts that helped me find my footing, and I think they'll do the same for you. And guess what? I'm giving the book away free. Just head to mothersworkthebook.com to grab yours. Just pay shipping and handling, and also get your hands on some wonderful bonuses. You don't have to do this alone. Let's walk this journey together. That's mothersworkthebook.com. Can't wait for you to read it. Talk to these parents about how to do other things with their children, and not and keep these tablets out of their hands, when it's so hard. And then and then you have parents that have different rules about it and different approaches about it, and so your preschooler sees the other kids with tablets and phones and what have you. So what can parents do about that?
Yeah, so a lot of times when I'm coaching parents who have kids that are really addicted to tablets or their phone, you don't want to just say no, it's gone forever, you can't have it, because it's a reality. It's part of, and there are things they can learn from it. There are good things about it, but you need to put limits. And a good thing to do is to create a contract with your child about, let's say, how the time, right, when they get home from school, how is the schedule going to look until bedtime? And work on that schedule with your child so that they feel like they have some input and some control over it. So I often tell parents, get an egg timer and say to your child, all right, well, you have to come home and you can have, 20, what do you think? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? How much time do you think you need on your tablet before you'll be ready to start your homework? And if they say 3 hours, say, yeah, okay, no, that's not on the table, but, I'm willing to give you 20 if you need 30, they'll always pick 30, but make the choices where you're fine with whatever they choose. And then say, okay, great. So I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give you the egg timer. You set it for 30 minutes. And when the timer goes off, shut down your tablet and you bring the timer to me and let me know that you're ready for starting your homework. And so just the idea of giving them some sort of control and input and stewardship over it helps, because they don't feel like you're like, no, stop. You can't be on it. You can't do it. And then you say, and look, if we get through the next 5 things that we need to get through, the homework, the dinner, getting ready for bed or whatever, then you can have another 15, 20 minutes to wrap up, if you need to. And so they don't feel like just my way or the highway, and it's, they're not getting it at all, but they know that they have to get things done first to earn that time.
Yeah, and that's really about developing some discipline around it, and by you establishing boundaries, it really does help them learn how to establish them for themselves, not only in terms of sheer usage of the devices, but also to know when to turn it off when they're bombarded with all of this stressful information.
Yes.
Not for me right now. I'm done. That's something that I'm definitely finding I have to do a lot more now in the times we're living in. But that's something that you're passing on to them as well. Now, when our children have some awareness of some stressful world event, or even whether it's local, what are some strategies that parents can use to help them cope with what they know? They know a fire has happened, they know there was a car accident or whatever. What can parents do to help them process and deal with the news?
Well, I think it really depends on what they're individually going through. So if a child has lost a home, it's going to be a lot different on how they need to process than a child who's heard about someone else who's lost their home. So I think what the kids are going through in California now is much different than, say, just kids that have been hearing about it. So, there's the fear of what if and what would happen if. And I think that's easier to talk about. Well, we're safe. We have things in place. We don't have the same type of environment. We have, let's practice our exit strategy. Let's make sure that our fire alarms are all working. Let's do things to show that we're proactive. And that gives kids a sense of control and makes them feel better. I think kids that are actually living through this tremendous loss, I would recommend that a parent has their child visit a child therapist for ongoing, continual therapy to really work through this, because it's not something that the parent who's also dealing with the loss of a home and their livelihood can really deal with on their own, on their own, let alone helping their child deal through it. So I think it's really important to make sure that your child does have a therapist, someone that's not in it, right now trying to get their insurance and clean things up and find out where we're going to live, like somebody separate that can just help your child process everything. So I think in that case, you need some outside help.
That makes sense. That definitely makes
Yeah.
sense. And so, what role can schools play in educational settings to handle discussions about what's going on in the news and the political stress, like even now?
So what we do at our school is we have the older kids always pick a social action topic that they want to teach the other kids about,
Mm-hmm.
and we give them some choices. It could be, do you want to teach kids how we elect our president? Do you want to teach the kids about voting? Not about this party or that party, just about the
Sure.
process,
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to there was a big hurricane, and everything in North Carolina. Do you want to let's talk about when weather things happen and people have, issues and they need clothes and they need food and they need water. What can we do as a school and as 4-year-olds to help them? I bet you have ideas, and we have them list ideas, and then we'll have them go class to class and say, there's some kids that don't have what we have. They lost some things. They had a lot of rain and they need some things. So we're going to collect stuff for them. And it makes them feel like they're doing something, they're actively helping. And then, you say, and look, if everyone helps, so we don't even live in North Carolina and Florida, but look, we're helping. So, there's always going to be helpers for us. If we have a lot of rain and we need things, there's always helpers, but everyone helps each other. And so then they feel like, okay, I guess I'll be fine if something happens here, because we're helping them and we don't even live there. So by giving them something to do and talk about and help, I think that just gives them that like positivity about it and helps them get through it. And they start thinking more about not how bad it is, but how great it is that they're doing something for someone else.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, in your experience, like at your school, or maybe through working with your clients, I mean, parents, and families, how much are you seeing in your school that children know about what's going on? Some of the big things going on, wars and
Yeah.
natural disasters, astronauts stuck in space, all this stuff. How much do they seem to know about this?
Yeah, when you say it like that, it almost seems like you're making up stuff because it sounds so horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is this all happening at one time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Surprisingly, they're pretty resilient. They
Mm-hmm.
may like mention it real quickly. Oh, I heard there was an astronaut stuck in space. And we're like, yeah, but we're going to get them out. They're going to be fine. And then they move on to something else. They're much more resilient than I think we are. They don't necessarily like hyper focus on the bad things, which is
Mm-hmm.
a great part of being a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been a huge issue. I mean, there are some kids that really do struggle with general anxiety, and then, that's a whole nother thing. But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, I think they're really good at compartmentalizing. And then, they'll say, oh, did you hear about the astronaut stuck in space? And we'll say, oh, yeah, but he'll be fine. And they're like, okay, want to play Legos?
Okay.
They're able to sort of move on,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because, they're not thinking like we are, like, oh, they're stuck in space. What's going to happen to their muscles? They're going to atrophy. They're going to, how are they going to get back? Like
Mm-hmm.
luckily, they don't think about all those horrible
Mm-hmm.
extra catastrophizing like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, that's
so as
good
long as
to
we can
hear.
redirect them,
Mm-hmm.
redirect.
That's good to hear because, as I shared, I haven't spent time with little people like that in quite a while. And my clients tend to have children that are older than that. Usually it's kind of 3 years old on the low end, not as many, but mostly elementary school to middle school. So I don't
Yeah.
hear as much about what's on their minds. What are you excited about in your school and interacting with those children? What hope do you have looking at them about our future?
I think one of the things that makes me smile the most is
Hmm.
that now that we have been around for some time, we kind of have that longitudinal
Hmm.
study. And we are able to see the kids that started with us when they were 2 and went through our program learning about being kind, sharing, caring about others, having empathy and sympathy. We see them now as high school students applying to college, and many of them are still friends, and they're leading the social action in their high school.
Beautiful.
They're performing in the school plays. They're doing charitable things. They are actually, volunteering to work at our school over the summer, to work with kids like themselves, like they were. And I think it's like a hopeful thing. You feel like if you give kids a good foundation, and they really do, I feel like kids really do become the person that they're going to be before they even turn 5. They really do form so many opinions about themselves and about their abilities and about whether they're a kind person or a smart person. And I think by giving them that great foundation, and what all parents can do, give them that great foundation and really model the behavior that you want them to exhibit, that gives me hope, because I see it working. And I see all these kids, we had one little boy who he left our school and he was on a soccer team, and he would get ready to get the ball and he would just stop. And his mom said, well, why aren't you grabbing, why aren't you trying to get the ball away from the other boy? And he said, because at London Day School, we learned you're not supposed to grab things from people. And she goes, well, at soccer, you can.
Oh, my goodness. That reminds me so much of my son. One of my sons, I believe he was in elementary school and running track, and he would slow down and wait for his friend, like looking over his shoulder to see where his friend was. Like, keep going. Keep going. It's sweet.
They're too good and too sweet. It's just so nice. So nice.
Exactly. Well, listen, I've enjoyed talking with you today about this. I really think it's important to think about how we're modeling behavior with our preschoolers. It's a challenging time, but it can also be a joyful time, because just for the reasons that you just said, the way, the lens that they're looking through the world in, they're so hopeful and positive, and we don't want to take that from them. And so I thank you for that, and I hope that our listeners will check out your book. Tell us how we can follow you.
Sure. So on Instagram, you can find me at Danielle Lindner, Lindner. And then I also have a lot of free resources on my YouTube channel, which is Danielle Lindner -official.
Okay.
And my website, which is also DanielleLindner.com.
Okay, well, that sounds great. That our listeners and those who are watching should be able to easily find you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to this conversation with Danielle Lindner on protecting young children from news overload and political stress. And for more parenting tips, insights, and community support, join us in the Parenting 411 community on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/the Parenting 411 community, where you can connect with other parents, access valuable resources, and stay updated on the latest parenting news. And by joining our community, you'll become part of a vibrant network that's dedicated to helping you navigate the challenges and joys of parenting. I can't wait to see you next time. And as always, remember, it's never too late to be the parent you want to be. Talk to you next time. We bring you this episode for the purpose of information and entertainment only. It is not the intent or purpose of the Parenting 411 podcast or Carol Maletta to provide an exhaustive reference or guide on all aspects of parenting, childcare, and family life. You are strongly encouraged to read all available information, consult medical or other appropriate professionals, and pursue all reasonable means to learn as much as possible about parenting, to complement what you gain here, and then tailor the information to meet your individual needs. Yes, parenting is a serious matter, though it is not an exact science. The context and insights offered in this and every episode represent an account of knowledge and personal experiences of the host and any featured guests for the viewers' and listeners' information and consideration. The host and guests do not guarantee to our viewers or listeners any specific parenting outcomes from this episode or taking actions described here.